position to lose their lives. Now, this brought a lot of issues from a lot of international organizations, from the civil society. Very many Tanzanians were abducted, who by this time, most of them have not been in position to be seen. Now, after that, people are saying that probably Tanzania is embarking on what we call a public relations campaign. A campaign that is helping them to shape a new picture, to paint a new picture, to shape a new identity, to make sure that they appear differently, to make sure that people forget about the 500 people that were killed within the uprisings that came after the 29th October elections. Now, very many international organizations came out and condemned what happened to Tanzania, including the International Human Rights Watch, Amnesty International, and the United Nations Human Rights Commission also came out and condemned what happened in Tanzania. Now, there are so many documentaries that were in position to be done about what happened in Tanzania, where so many names of very many security operatives, including the most popular one was called a gentleman called Mofere. Mofere is one of the people that works within the ISO, an equivalent of the ISO in Tanzania, that is International Organization, that was very operative within that very time. So many people were abducted. Some of them have not been in position to be brought back. Also, this kind of scaffold did not affect only people in Tanzania. It also affected journalists that were coming from different African countries, including journalists from Uganda and as well journalists from Nairobi. Now, after that kind of scaffold, people are getting to understand that probably Samia Suluhu, after that kind of regiment that was not okay, bloodshed, abduction of people, they abducted a lot of social media influencers, and they believe that probably Tanzania is embarking on what you would call a public relations campaign. And guess what? They were also in position to sign a very big deal with Engraves. Now, Engraves is one of the biggest public relations firms actually that operates in Washington. Why they signed it up with this was to ensure that they change the kind of narrative that Tanzania has in the international space, because they were in a position to be given $500,000 on an annual basis, $500,000 to be in a position to make sure that they paint Tanzania in a very good way. That PR firm is called Engraves, and it's so very much influential when it comes to shaping the public opinion, most especially amongst the American senators and the Congress. So Tanzania is embarking on a PR campaign. But what are the big brothers within the region saying? We've just got to know that President Museveni was in a position to visit Tanzania in early February or early March. I don't have the facts, with me or off head. But after that, we're in a position to see the president of Rwanda, also Paul Kagame, was in a position to go to Tanzania. And then the last one has been in position to visit this very country is William Samoei Ruto, the legitimate president of the neighboring country, that is Kenya. Now the question is, what is really going on within Tanzania, or what is going on within the entire East African region? Now, following a discussion that was held by President Yoweri Museveni of Uganda, William Samoei Ruto of Kenya, and Aliko Dangote, there was a conference that was held in Nairobi. This conference was called the Africa We Build. The Africa We Build, and the keynote speaker that was invited there was Aliko Dangote. Now, Aliko Dangote came in here, that was in Nairobi rather, to have a discussion with the two East African heads of government, to tell them about how we are in a position to come up with an oil refinery. Now, the problems that East Africa has are not only for East Africa. This is an African problem that for so long, as early as 1970, Nigeria has their own oil, but they've never had a refinery. So it was this very year that Aliko Dangote was in a position to finish the only indigenous oil refinery that is owned by them. So yes, they have a little bit of a few ones, but they are not theirs. They belong to Shell, they belong to BP Oil. Now, the inspiration that Aliko Dangote was bringing within the East African region was to tell the heads of states that you can be in a position to establish your own oil refinery, and it was supposed to be established within Tanzania. And the discussion was had that it would be established in Tanga. Now, the entire discussion was had without the presence of Samia Suluhu. Now, that is also a little bit, raises a lot of questions. How can the two heads of East African states negotiate the establishment of a project in one of the East African region, one of the East African member states, without the presence of that head of state? Why is it that they didn't talk about putting it in Uganda? Why not Kenya? Why not Rwanda? But they chose Tanzania, and the area is Tanga. Now, when William Samoei Ruto visited Tanzania, the first question that Samia Suluhu asks his comrade, or the big brother, is, how can you negotiate the establishment of an oil refinery in my country without me being in the know? Now that also raised a lot of questions. The two heads of states plus the richest man on the African continent agreed to establish an oil refinery in Tanzania without the presence of the leader of Tanzania. So that's why when Ruto goes to Tanzania, the first question that Samia Suluhu, the president of Tanzania, asks, that how can you negotiate on my behalf, or how can you negotiate on behalf of my country without us being in presence, with us in absentia? In other words, Tanzania never had any head of state, they never had any diplomat, they never had any minister in the discussion. Now the question comes in, what is really going on within the East African region? Are all okay? Are all the heads of states okay with everything? Because we negotiate that we are going to establish in Tanga. Tanga is not part of Kenya, it's not part of Uganda, though the two heads of states were in presence. But the head of state of Tanzania was not in presence. So we were like, okay, how can you negotiate? It was something that raised a lot of issues. Actually, the atmosphere was a little bit disturbed when Samia Suluhu open asked that question to William Samoei Ruto. But you don't have to forget that African problems are really the same. Yes, Aliko Dangote was in a position to establish the biggest oil refinery that we have within the East African region. But guess what? It is Nigeria. But Aliko Dangote does not have access to the crude oil from Nigeria. Where does he get his crude? He gets it from Angola. All the oil supplies, all the oil wells in Nigeria are in the hands of the BP Energy and then Shell. Meaning that they have an oil refinery that cannot be fed by the oils that are coming from their own country. Now that is still a serious problem. Now, will Aliko Dangote rely on the crude oil that he exports? He imports from Angola, because he doesn't have his own oil. He gets this from Angola. He gets this as far as Venezuela. Actually, that was before the overthrow of the regime of Nicolas Maduro. He gets the oils or the crude from Venezuela. He gets some from South Africa, and then the biggest from Angola. Aliko Dangote doesn't have access to the oils or to the crude oil that is within his own country, Nigeria. Now, coming back to the East African region and what is really coming around, yes, Ruto was in a position to have a very successful discussion, and we don't know what really is coming next. But the biggest question is, are all the East African heads of states okay? Now, we really need to look into what each and every person perceives as far as the East African community agenda is concerned. Of course, the biggest pusher or the biggest general that has been behind this community right away since 1990s is General Kaguta Museveni. He was in position to raise it up, have a conversation with the Daniel Arap Moi in Kenya, and of course with the Chikwete in Tanzania, and they were in a position to bring it up. Of course with Benjamin Mkapa as well, and other leaders that have been in position to come up in the land of Tanganyika or Tanzania. Now, for Kenya stands out as the biggest economy within the East African region, and it stands out to be one of the biggest industrialist states within the East African region. Now, Uganda, of course, we are there. But when you move to Tanzania, definitely, the fact that they also have access to the East African coastline, it makes them the biggest logistic hub that can be in position to supply all the East African states, including Rwanda, Burundi, Congo, and Uganda. Now, when you talk about the East African community, we are talking about a country or a region that has a population of 500 million people. Because you don't forget, Kenya has almost 57 million people. Tanzania has almost 70 something. Uganda, we have 51. Rwanda, they have 16. South Sudan, they have 21. And a little bit of these other countries brought together. Of course, you also have the Democratic Republic of Congo, which is the highly populated area. Now, if you're talking about the 500 million people, we are also talking about the regional borders. The regional boundaries that have been in position to be created. Of course, the different customs have been so much open to different African countries. But you're also realizing that there are also some kind of inconsistencies. So the entire region we are talking about a region of 500 million people. That is almost the population of the European Union. because the European Union has, the entire zone has a population of almost 520 and 550 million people, meaning that the East African population is bigger than the entire population of the European Union. And you don't have to forget that Congo is also part of the Union, meaning that we have a coast at the Indian Ocean, and then we go as far as the Atlantic Ocean. Now that's a very big region. But in order for this region to move forward, all East African heads of states have to be speaking the same language. You don't forget that we have countries within the region that are not yet stable. The government of South Sudan has problems. For the last 2 years, their civil servants have not been paid. Why? South Sudan gets a lot of money from their oil. Now all their oil refineries and processes and plants are located in the northern Sudan, that is Sudan Khartoum. And for the last 6 years, Sudan Khartoum has had issues between General Dagalo and General Burhan. Now that is something that affected the supply of oils within from South Sudan to the northern part of Sudan, where processes can be done. Meaning that the government of South Sudan is almost bankrupt. It cannot run anything. And this is a member of the East African community. Let's also talk about a country like Congo, because it's also a new member of the East African region. Congo has been unstable as early as 1800. And what have the East African heads of states done about it? They've not done anything yet that is a little bit sensitive. Or you don't have to forget that last year there was what we call a Washington Protocol, where 2 heads of states within the East African region, including one of Rwanda and one of Kenya, they were in a position to be invited in Washington by Donald Trump, the president of the US, to talk about what was happening within the region. And they all agreed. Now, on an open front, Tshisekedi, the president of the Democratic Republic of Congo, was in position to openly accuse his fellow president, and that's the president of Rwanda, Paul Kagame, accusing him of supporting all the rebel groupings, majorly M23, that is responsible for destabilizing the region. Now, this is a fellow member of the region being accused of destabilizing another fellow member. Now, if the East African region is supposed to move forward, we must iron out all this. Now, we are talking about the establishment of an oil refinery in Tanga, that is, almost near Dar es Salaam in Tanzania. But all this supply, or the refinery, would be in position to supply all the East African member states. But you cannot talk about a member that's a little bit unstable, because you don't even know whether these countries are really, really legitimately interested in becoming part of that. Most especially when almost 2/4 or 2/3 rather of those countries are not controlled by the governments. I think first things should be done is to establish what you call the East African Army, standby army. The president of this country has always been talking about it, because when Congo is unstable, when South Sudan is unstable, you cannot have joint operations. You also don't have to forget that the East African region has embarked on several projects. One of them is the standard gauge railway line. Now, Kenya has done their own part. The rail line is already established. Uganda has had issues, most especially when it comes to the financing of the standard gauge railway line. Now, the first deal was, it was supposed to be facilitated or funded by the Chinese, but the Chinese government and the Chinese firm that was so much responsible for that, they said we can't put in a lot of money. They wanted Uganda to facilitate instead. We failed to agree. Now, Uganda's part is not yet done, but Kenya's part is almost done. Kenya's part was almost funded by the African Development Bank and a lot of funding and support from the Chinese. When it came to Uganda's side, the Chinese were a little bit skeptical. We don't know exactly why the Chinese fall out of this arrangement. Now, the deal went away from the Chinese and was given to the Turks. Turkey came in with an interest of supporting the establishment of the standard gauge line on Ugandan side. Turkey also failed. It was this last month that the government of Uganda was in a position to have this deal given back, not to Chinese, not to the Turks, but to the Americans. Now, there is a very big problem. I'll come back to that. Let's also talk about the East African crude pipeline that is also being established within this region. The deal, initially, the East African Oil Crude Corporation, East African crude pipeline, was supposed to be dealt between Uganda and Kenya. Now, for some reason, Kenya was knocked out of the deal. Now, the establishment is between Uganda and Tanzania. Now, the Kenyans were not happy at all with this kind of arrangement. They didn't like it, but it's moving forward now with the base in Tanzania. Now, there is a big issue around there. That is also the second project. The first project is the Standard Gauge Line. The second one is the East African Crude Oil Pipeline. That is also one of the major engagements that the region has gotten involved in. Now, there's a big issue as well. Let's look at the leadership in each and every country. Are they really interested? Of course, we are talking about the president of South Sudan, the president of Burundi, the president of Rwanda, and the president of Congo. But the three heads of states, the true or the initial or the core East African community is between Uganda, Kenya, and Tanzania. Because even the pioneers of this arrangement was President Milton Obote of Uganda, Mwalimu Julius Kambarage Nyerere of Tanzania, and Jomo Kenyatta of Kenya. Now it seems that the three heads of states or the three countries are a little bit on a higher stake than the rest of other East African countries. But also let's look at the three leaders, at least that are leading this kind of community. Ruto seems to be a little bit very ambitious. It seems to be a little bit of a populist that wants to take over the East African region. Of course, the father of the region as we speak is General Kaguta Museveni of Uganda. Now, Samia Suluhu, being a person that comes from the Chama cha Mapinduzi, they are very conservative. The position of Tanzania within the East African community is not so much known because they don't so much speak a lot. Tanzania seems to have a very inward-looking strategy. That's why Samia Suluhu was in position to confront openly when she was addressing Ruto that how can we negotiate the establishment of an oil refinery in my country without my presence, without me being in the know. So Ruto had to play it a little bit down, but this was in the open. Now that also communicates a lot. In other words, the three heads of states within the East African region that are leading the campaign of establishment of the East Union seem to be on different levels as well. You don't have to forget that the disadvantage is the father is aging. That is General Kaguta Museveni. This would be the most popular time within the East African countries, amongst the East African member states, to ensure that they push up a union, most especially when the rest of the world is disorganized. So the point is very simple, and the question is very simple as well. Are the three heads of states willing to ensure that East African community moves forward? Are all on the same page? I don't think that's true, confirmed with what we're saying. But of course, there are so many disadvantages that the region and the citizenry within this country or within this region can be in a position to benefit. So the union is the future. Whether now or later, the union of this region is the future. With a population of almost 500 million people, bigger than the entire population of the European Union, I totally believe that if all these countries and heads of states can forget their differences and do something that is very, very good and beneficial, that will be very awesome. But you don't have to forget that we have so many players within the South African community. There are so many players. Now, we've talked about some of the funders that are funding some of these projects. We've talked about China. We've talked about Turkey. We've talked about America. Russia is coming in here. The UAE is here. Qatar is here. Saudi Arabia is here. Iran is here. Of course, we don't have to forget our former exploiter colonizers. Let me say like that. Britain is here. Germany is also here. And Canada is here. Now, for the East African community to get a little bit very united, we must be in position to forget about foreign intrigue. Because the Chinese will not allow the East African community to get established when Uganda is not part, when Kenya is not part. The Americans would not like that to happen when the Chinese are the leaders. You don't have to forget, these are British territories. Even when Tanzania was in position to lose, even when Germany lost control over Tanzania in 1920 after World War I, Tanzania was also given to the Britons. Meaning that all these players, the Chinese are coming, the Americans are coming, the Canadians are coming, but they are all playing within the British territory. Are the Britons okay with this? So the biggest challenge that the East African region or the Union of the East African Community is going to face is about foreign intrigue. Are the Europeans okay with it? And the biggest challenge as well that is coming in amongst some of the biggest member states is the involvement of Congo. The moment you talk about Congo and bringing it close or making it part of the East African community, you're bringing all the problems in the world. Because the cobalt, the copper, the zinc, the gold, all the mineral and rare earth metals that we have in Congo have always been a source of conflicts, disturbances and conflicts within that region. You don't forget that within Congo, there are almost 20 militia groups that are fighting already. Will they accept to have the entire Congo get into the East African community? So those are some of the strategic questions that have to be answered before we push. You don't have to forget that foreigners have been in position to fight. Actually, the East African community has been one of the biggest communities that have been fought to ensure that we don't get united. But time is flying away. We've been in position to see something that has changed in different countries. This also takes us to another story. Let's move to Sahel, because almost problems seem to be alike. Now, let's move to Sahel. In Mali, at the end of last week, the Minister of Security was killed. Now, this is a gentleman called Sadio Kamara. The Minister of Security was killed in Mali. He was killed by a joint operation that was made by all the terrorist groups and the rebels in Mali. Now, Sadio Kamara was the closest ally of Assimi Goïta. Actually, even when they were planning their first coup and the second coup, it was Sadio Kamara and Assimi Goïta. Now, as we speak, actually it was on Friday that Sadio Kamara was killed at his home. His home is almost near Bamako. Bamako is the capital city of Mali. The Minister of Security was killed, Sadio Kamara, near Bamako, the capital city. Now, all those are very, very big statements, but this is what happened. The Minister of Security was eliminated by the joint operation. This joint operation definitely was led by the Tuareg fighters. Now, the Tuareg fighters have been very operational within this region as early as 1960s. But I don't forget that we are talking about a region that has been very unstable right away from the days. I don't even know where to start from when it comes to this very story. But this is what happened. The Minister of Security was attacked at his home and was killed. The gentleman was known as Sadio Kamara. Now, this brought up a lot of uprisings. Actually, before even that, even Assimi Goïta, the president of Congo, the president of Mali, the reigning president of Mali, was also somehow taken down through a military coup. Now, it was by the support of the AfriCorps or Africa Corps. Africa Corps, this is a militia group or a paramilitary that is so much backed up by Russia that came into Africa, most especially from around 2019, around there. They've been operational. But the elimination of Sadio Kamara brought about a lot of issues. Remember, I've told you 3 days before, the president was also ousted out of power, allegedly. But the coup was a failure. It was a total fiasco. That was because of the involvement of the Africa Corps, a militia group or a paramilitary organization, a private military organization. Let me call it a private military organization that has headquarters in Russia, that has been operational within most of the West African countries or in the Sahel region. Now, following the death of Sadio Kamara, Bamako was almost taken over. So all the rebel groups within Mali, the northern part of Mali, were in a position to merge themselves together, come up with a joint operation, and this joint operation was done towards a government, a legitimate government that is led by Assimi Goïta. What are some of the rebel groups that are operating in this very region? Now, the rebel groups are classified into so many groups, but the first one, we have what called ethnic groups. The ethnicities, the tribes within Mali, are being in position to mobilize themselves and form what we call militia groups. Mali has almost 51 tribes. We're talking about a country that is very ancient, that is so much respected in African history. Now, we have ethnic groups that were in position to put up their own militia groups to protect themselves. Then we have Islamic groups that are so much related to the ISIS. Some of them are related to the Al-Qaeda. We also have what we call groups that were supported by the former president of Libya, Kanumama El Gaddafi. And these are referred to as, in most cases, the Tuareg fighters. Now, these ones have been so much fighting right away since 1960s. They've been very, very, very operational right away from all that time. And then we also have a lot of groups in there that are fighting on behalf of France. All this region, when you talk about the Sahel region, we are referring to that region that has a lot of former French colonies. This region has been very, very, very unstable for so many reasons. Now, it was because of this that almost all generals within this region decided to fight and take over the government. And one of the first coups that was established, it was a coup that was established by Assimi Goïta. They were in a position to put the leadership down. Assimi Goïta started what we call the alliance of the Sahel region or the Sahel states. Now, he was in a position to connect up with Ibrahim Tchemane. Ibrahim Tchemane, now we are going into Niamey. We are moving to Niger or Niger. And then he was also in a position to be joined by Ibrahim Traoré. Now we're moving down to Ouagadougou. Ouagadougou, that is Burkina Faso. So in Burkina Faso, in Mali, and in Niger, all these countries came together and formed what we call the Sahel, the Association of Sahel States, the AES, Association of Sahel States. They came up with a joint army of 5,000 troops. They came up with the regional bank, and they came up with legitimate regional leaders that have been in position to push forward their own narrative within this very region. They were also in a position to support a coup in Benin, but the coup in Benin was a failure. It was a failure because Nigeria got involved. Tinubu, the president of Nigeria, received a phone call from the president of France, little Napoleon, Macron. He called him and was like, please make sure that the coup in Benin does not become successful. Now you have to look at this. I don't know if our producer can be in a position to get this map of the Sahel region, such that we try to look at what you're trying to refer to here. Now you have Niger, you have Burkina Faso, and then you have a coup in Mali. Now they establish themselves and they form what you call an alliance. This alliance has been very operational. They established a joint force of 5,000 troops led by Ismail Traoré. Ismail Traoré is a colonel in Burkina Faso, not Ibrahim Traoré, who is the top most person. Now, differences have been there. What you have to understand is that a couple of months ago, almost 40% of Mali, almost 40% of Mali was controlled by these rebel fighters. Mali has been almost in the control to the extent that almost the entire northern part of Bamako was almost taken over by the rebels. This made it so hard for the livelihoods to continue very well within the northern part, within the southern part of Mali, to the extent that they will never even have access to oil. Now, the Tuareg fighters, these are the remnants of the people that were in a position to fight and put down the regime of Kanumama Gaddafi. Gaddafi was using the Tuareg fighters. Who are the Tuaregs? Now, the Tuareg are a mixed blood. They are not so dark like Assimi Goïta. They are not so dark like other people. These are remnants. These are remnants. It was because of the intermarriage between the Africans and the Arabs. These people look a little bit brown. They are not so dark. They are not so melanated like the black people. So for them, they consider themselves as minorities within this very region. They consider themselves minorities within this region. So each and every time, they've been fighters. They've always been fighting because they feel that they are left out in the leadership of Mali. They always want to be into the leadership of this country, but they've always been left out. So it's because of this fertile ground that it has been very easy for them to get used up by each and every person that seeks to take over leadership within this very region. One person that used them for so long was Kanumama Gaddafi. He used them because he wanted to control that very region for so many reasons, economic reasons and what. So they consider themselves displaced and marginalized. That's why they've been in position to get involved in so many conflicts within this region. But we also have the ISIS. We also have the Al-Qaeda. The leader of the Al-Qaeda was eliminated in 2010 when Barack Obama was the president. That is the so-called Osama bin Laden. He was killed in Pakistan, actually in Palestine, Islamabad. He was eliminated in 2010. But the Al-Qaeda is bigger than how it was 50 times. Because we didn't have Al-Qaeda operating outside Afghanistan back in the days. But as we speak, Al-Qaeda is bigger than how it was before the elimination of Osama bin Laden 50 times. So the killing of Osama bin Laden, their so-called leader, make them more powerful or weaken them. I know if you remember, when Donald Trump was campaigning, coming for this presidency, actually for the first time, he himself said that the ISIS and the Al-Qaeda were a creation of Barack Obama and the crooked Hillary Clinton. I'm quoting exactly what Donald Trump was in position to say out. Now, the entire Sahel region, we are talking about a region that was colonized by France. All these countries have been very, very unstable. So when Assimi Goïta takes over leadership in Mali, when the Burkina or the Burkina Faso gets taken up by Ibrahim Traoré, and when Ibrahim Tchouamani takes over leadership in Niger, France gets a little bit disturbed. They get disturbed. Two, they chased away the use of the francs because all these countries are using francs. You don't forget that France gets 500 million francs on an annual basis from all their former colonies in Africa. France was not happy. Now the uranium, the gold, the diamond that is coming from all those resources that are coming from this very region were stopped. Burkina Faso changed their trading businesses. Burkina Faso has moved so much forward. Mali had moved under leadership of Assimi Goïta, and most especially when it came to getting a relationship with Vladimir Putin, because all of them at least have had a visit in Russia. That also explains the presence of the Africa Corps, a paramilitary organization that has headquarters in, of course, Kenya, in Russia. Now the point is here, is France okay to see their former colonies moving forward? The fact is France is not okay at all. Yesterday we talked about France. It's one of the biggest industrial states. But out of all the industries that are operational in France, 2/3 of the power that they use, they get it from uranium. But France doesn't have any uranium deposit. In other words, France operates using nuclear energy, but they don't have any uranium in their country. Where do they get uranium from? Now, the countries that we are talking about, the Mali, the Niger, Burkina Faso, and most of the West African countries are the richest countries when it comes to uranium. Not forgetting that Mali is the second richest producer of gold on this planet. So is France okay to let all their minerals, that, though they say, to be out? The fact is, little Napoleon cannot let that happen. There are so many French leaders that have been in position to accept that their countries cannot be progressive, they cannot be successful when they don't have their exploiting habits within African countries. Let's talk about this operation which was done by the terrorists. These are all different groups. Like we've said, we have those that are supported at ethnic level, because when leadership fails, even tribes within mobilize their own resources. Banyakyalo ne bekwata ne bafuna obukumi ne bafuna amajambia ne bafuna ebiso nabo bekolemu omulimu. Now those are the tribal groups that we're talking about. And then we also have jihadists. Jihadists, we are referring to Islamic fundamentalists, the JNIM, that are so much related to the ISIS, the Nusra Front, and the Al-Qaeda. They've also been very operational. You don't forget that we are talking about a country that's next to Algeria. And definitely when you talk about Algeria, then you move into a desert. Mali has what we call a Kadar Desert. That Kadar region is what is next to what we call that biggest desert, the Sahara Desert around that side. Some of the areas where this big conflict so much got hyped was the Kadar region, the Gao region, the Moti region, and the northern part of Bamako. This was very deadly. But the good news was the Sahel Alliance, or the Alliance of the Sahel States, came together, led by the leadership of Ibrahim Traoré, Ibrahim Tchouamani, and Assimi Goïta. They got together, and guess what? Now they are bombing and killing the rebels and terrorists within this region. But this is what is very amazing. When the conflict started, when the rebels and terrorists were killing people, all European powers were quiet. Now, when the Sahel region came into a conference, a union, and they started fighting, European countries came out and said, please, humanitarian is needed. Humanitarian aid is needed. We must make sure that we open up spaces such that we can come and give humanitarian support to the people of this region that are suffering because of this conflict. Now, this was after the Sahel Alliance tripled their army. Remember, we talked about their army that they were in position to establish, and we said they set up an army of 5,000 troops led by Ismail Traoré, a Burkina Faso commander, not the big commander. Of course, the captain is Ibrahim. Now, the commander of this alliance was also a gentleman from Burkina Faso. Now, they tripled it. Instead of sending 5,000 troops, they sent 15,000. Now, that's why European powers got disturbed. And they were like, okay, let's come and offer humanitarian support. Now, that also raises a lot of questions. 2, how can all these groups that are not related, connected anywhere, together, come up with a joint operation? What does this mean? This means that their funder is the same. This means that they are in position to be called on and be supported by only one person. And we should also be in a position to look at the kind of ammunition. Ibrahim Traoré said that Burkina Faso and Mali, before their emergence, before them taking over leadership, these countries never had their own guns. They would run to Senegal and borrow guns. They would go to Benin and borrow guns. They would move down to Togo and borrow guns. Of course, when Ibrahim Traoré came over, him being a soldier and Assimi Goïta, they were in a position to buy a lot of ammunition from Russia. Now, this is the first of its kind. If the Sahel Alliance wins this conflict without any foreign support, without any support from the United Nations Security Council, without any support from the UN, without any support from the African Union, now that is going to send a very different message. Number 1, to the East African countries. Number 2, to the entire African region, including the African Union. And number 3, to the United Nations Security Council. All these countries have always been getting involved, and all these bodies have always been getting involved. Now, the Sahel Alliance, they didn't seek for any support. You don't forget that all these members were members of the ECOWAS, the Economic Community of West African States. The ECOWAS has an army called the ECOMOG. This is an army that is supposed to be operational within this region, but the ECOMOG has not gotten involved. The only country that has really gotten involved is Senegal. Senegal, at least, has been in position to send a few troops to ensure that they help in the liberation of Mali in the specific area called Kadar. If the alliance of the Sahel states wins and defeats all the jihadists and all the terrorist groups that you are trying to destabilize this very region, what would that send? Which kind of message will it send to the East African community, to the African Union, and to the UN? Allow me to go for a short commercial break. You're still watching New Day on TV1. Like I said initially, every Friday we focus on the biggest stories that have been in position to make the biggest news within the course of the week. We are coming back in our second hour. Be ready for the sports segment. And we shall also take a look at the sovereignty bill, which is now a law, you don't forget. And then we shall also do some assessment when it comes to the performance of the Bavubi cabinet, like it was called by President Yoweri Kaguta Museveni when they were starting their leadership in 2021. I'll be joined with by a colleague, Mugabe Regan, because he's our biggest political producer here, and he gets involved in all that. I'll be joined by him, and then we shall talk about the 2 issues. Number 1, the sovereignty law, which we bill and now which is a law, and then we shall also do some assessment when it comes to the performance of the government here, Bavubi. Mr. Second hour, you're going to be joined by our political juggernaut.
That's too much. You can't call me
juggernaut. Mugabe Regan is our producer for this very show, yes. And he's also the person behind most of the talk shows that you see inside the Politics Yogi Kids. So he's very much a very sharp eye when it comes to following of the political events that have been in position to transcend when it's this very period. So good morning, Regan.
Good morning, Dr. Charles.
You're welcome.
I'm humbled to be here.
Yeah, where do you start from? The bill or the fishermen's cabinet?
I think it all starts with the bill, because the bill was passed by the Fishermen's Cabinet, as the President calls the 11th Parliament. And over the weekend, that was on Sunday, President Museveni, I would call it the last dinner. Yes, the President himself had the last dinner with the Cabinet before the passing of this bill. And if you remember, that is General David Muhoozi, also acting as the Minister of Internal Affairs, and also that he is the one who brought the bill on the floor of Parliament. That was on the 15th of April. And we've got the bill very many people came out to talk about that bill, whereby we've seen quite a number of different organizations talking about the bill, and many of them weren't happy with it. And that was on Tuesday, it was passed, and it was the second reading of this bill, but later on it was passed. And I will take you back a few days back. This very bill, we saw that was last week. The President himself came out and signed 8 new bills that turned out to be laws, and this bill was rejected by the President. He came out and said and instructed the Attorney General to go back and reform this bill according, and I quote what he said. He said, "This is not what I told you to do. Restricting Ugandans from getting money from abroad, that is not part of the NRM government." That's what he says. He says the NRM government is very okay with people receiving money from outside the country, but the bill was restricting Ugandans from getting money from abroad. And besides that money alone, also the punishment for individuals that spread false information that will affect or sabotage the economy of the country. They are entitled to be imprisoned for 20 years. But as you see, that was the second reading, where they reduced the years from 20 to 10 years. And I would say at the first reading of this bill, the Minister of Internal Affairs had more authority or had more power. The bill had given him more power, that he had the say more than any other institution that concerns the money that comes in the country. But in the second reading, his powers were reduced. Okay. Yes.
Yeah, for me, actually, I was one of the first people that supported this bill, but I had not seen the details of, because from the name, the Sovereignty Bill, and when the position talk about it here with the Rita Bakunzi on New Desert, and we say that this law it's even in other countries. Yes. China has one, India has
America
one,
itself has one. Yes.
All these countries have this specific deal, because at the end of the day, you must be in position to defend your sovereignty. But when the entire bill was a little bit read out, we realized, like it had so many loopholes. Yes. It had so many gaps. And the biggest question is about the panic. And the speed through which this bill was passed. And why is it that? Because at the end of the day, by January, we know, by the end of February actually, by the end of January, because elections were on the 15th of January. Yes. By Feb, we already know that the government is almost getting done. Yes. Why would people struggle so much to ensure that they pass this law? Because constitutionally, even the parliamentary system and where we copy it from in the UK, that period is referred to as what called the lame duck period. Yes. It's like when America goes to the polls, because America votes, they vote in November. They vote in November, but the president takes an oath in January the following year. So between November and January, within that period of time, the president is referred to as the lame duck. Yes. The lame duck president. Yes. Now the lame duck means that there is a duck but it's lame. In other words, he has limited powers. Because there is now a president-elect, there's a president-elect, a president who is coming in the next 2-3 months. Yes, yes. Now, all the responsibilities of that president are a little bit limited by the terms and the powers of the constitution. So it's almost the same occurrence
here. So by that time, the country is ruled by who? By the prime minister?
Not really. The president has powers.
We have no government. We have no government or acting
government. Not really. The president has powers, but powers are limited. are limited. In other words, there is business he can do and there is business he can't do.
Yes.
Because the mandate has already been given to someone else.
Yes.
So within that very arrangement is the arrangement under which we also look at the government of Uganda. I mean the parliament of Uganda, because the parliament is almost in the lame duck. You understand?
Yes.
The speaker, the speaker was also just elected, meaning that she doesn't have the executive powers to execute her roles and responsibilities.
Yes.
So why do you rush to get this law out within under such circumstances? So that's one of the questions, and I saw even the MP from Mukono municipality, Honorable Betty Namboze, raising it that we are in the lame ducks period. Why are we struggling so hard to ensure that this gets out? What are we looking up to? What are we chasing? Because the entire cabinet, I mean, the new parliament is coming in just a month. You know, actually just 2 weeks.
2 weeks.
Why don't we wait that the business that we'll be in position to do remains there? And also this goes back to the entire performance of the 11th parliament.
Yes. Has
it really been beneficial to the Ugandans? Has that parliament really stood out? Irrespectiveness, because at the end of the day, you have almost 85% NRM. So you don't expect too much from such people. The opposition is very limited by numbers. So even when they are not so much interested into a given kind of declaration, but they don't have the numbers that can host the NRM numbers out.
But I was able to see quite a number of NRM MPs that weren't okay with this bill, for starters. Yes, many of them came out to support, but a number of them as well weren't okay, because a few of those that considered the local people that they are representing in the parliament came out and declared and mentioned or gave out key points concerning how this bill will affect the economy. For starters, when in the first reading, Ugandans that are in the diaspora were considered foreign agents, and that was really, you know, it was something very big, because you cannot call a Ugandan by nationality, regardless that he went abroad to look for, you know, for money, and you call them foreign agents because they send money in Uganda. You know, remember, actually, the bank, I was able to witness, I did some digging, and I saw that Uganda Revenue Authority gets like 2.5 billion taxes from the money that is being sent in Uganda on a year basis. That is to say yearly. You know, so if you call Ugandans that are abroad, if someone is abroad is no longer in Uganda, is a foreign agent, meaning whatever they do, all the money that they sent within the country supports activities that will sabotage the government, and that's why actually the president himself came out and gave out a letter concerning this very bill. He said Ugandans are very okay to go abroad and look for money, but the money that they bring in the country helps us to develop the country. When you look into the taxes that are being got from the money they sent, it has done quite a number of jobs. When you look into the road construction, the healthy sector, and so on and so forth. So that's why I would say many of them supported, but a number of them didn't support the bill until later on it was taken back and reconstructed and then brought back to Parliament to see that at least we would say for now it is fair. Though I've seen quite a number of NGOs, non-government organizations, not happy with this bill because they are being restricted from their activities. And remember, most of the work that is being done in Uganda, when you talk about the healthy sector and other different things that are being done by NGOs, money comes from people from abroad. And there is a way this bill can restrict, because you can't tell me that to get, if I'm to receive money that is beyond $400 million shillings, I'm supposed to write a letter to the Minister of Foreign Affairs. The question is, how long will it take to respond to that letter? Because I will not be the only one with that amount of money. There will be very many people writing letters. How long will it take for him to respond to that? And that will affect the economy of the country, and also a service delivery to the people, being that, truth be told, our government may not be able to fund 100% of each and everything that is in the country.
Yeah, actually, the government of Uganda is very poor when it comes to financing domestic operations. They are very, very poor. And also when it comes to priorities, how they prioritize the kind of priorities to, most especially if it comes to the NRM government, they are really, really very disturbing. And like you've said, the NRM government has given a little bit of some kind of space to the NGOs to operate, which was a good move, but also a bad one. Because yes, we've seen positive NGOs.
How is it a bad one? Being that you yourself, you just mentioned it, that the government itself cannot fund.
Yes. Yeah, they cannot fund. Why? Because at the end of the day, you don't tax your people. When politicians talk about the new taxes that were introduced by the NRM government, and you're like, come on, how do you impose all those taxes on consumer commodities? Because at the end of the day, any serious government, what the serious government can do is to ensure that how do we make sure that our people have the money?
Yes.
Because if the country is not producing, if the people are not producers, if people are not part of the production process, then you don't have the money. Uganda is a consumer commodity. I mean, it's a consumer society. All of what we do is to consume. To consume in you know, because the country is very, very open.
Uganda is called the United States of Africa.
Yeah.
Being that we would do there are some things that we do that also are being done in the United States of America. Someone comes in from wherever he is from, and he does whatever he wants concerning the investment.
Yeah, and the kind of investment that we are talking about here is not for the people. But I'm a little bit smiling when it comes to I have a small smile on my face when I'm talking about the establishment of industrial parks, because Uganda has established, the NRM government has been in position to establish almost 12 industrial parks. We have one in Gulu, one in Namamve, one in Boyogedere, Mbale, you know, Nakaseke, Nakaso. Like we have industrial parks, and we're yet to see what's going to be the importance of industrial parks. But of course, 2 of them have already been taken over by the Chinese. That is also something that we can talk about. 2 of them have been taken over by the Chinese, and you don't have to forget, even 95% of all the cottage industries, the small scale industries within this country are owned by Asians. So it is the Chinese and the Indians. No, so if we're talking about production, if we're talking about empowerment, if we're talking about helping your people get better, and to ensure that you can have a budget that is purely funded by the domestic revenue, you must be in position to empower that. I like the idea that industrial parks have been in position to put up, but we are so much interested in how are they going to be in position to perform? How are they going to be in position to produce commodities that are needed on world market? Because that is very, very, very important. 2, we also look at how the government prioritizes the priorities of the NRM. Last time you hosted us and we were talking about agriculture, Uganda being one of the agricultural countries. And they say 70% by statistics, 70% of the Ugandans thrive or survive on the whole. On digging. But let's look at the budgetary allocation. Because all these industries that we've been in position to establish, they would be so much focusing on value addition when it comes to agricultural products, right? But out of the 71.2 trillion, which is almost the figure that goes by the Ugandan budget, only 2.3% is allocated to agriculture.
Yes.
So you ask yourself, okay, now that you're saying that we are going to in the industrial hubs, right? And then we've had the 12 industrial hubs in different regions. What are they going to produce? Because the cheapest that they can produce is agriculture.
True.
Where they can get involved and do value addition. So that's why I was like, okay, the priorities of the NRM government are very disturbing.
How are they?
They are very disturbing because at the end of the day, if you're saying that we are an agricultural state, I mean, we're focusing more on agriculture, which is almost by the way.
And I quoted the president. He usually says into the last campaigns that were concluded, he says that Ugandans should stop farming for chidachonka. Stop farming for just to get food to eat. It is better you farm, you sell so that you can get money. You know.
I said it where, because that is also a question. Because Ugandans have tried
to the neighbor countries, for example, Sudan, Southern Sudan, people take their eggs, maize is being taken there, but of late also Southern Sudan, they have started farming for themselves. So the question is, the market will not be there for long. Yes,
no, actually, Sudan in the last 1 week, there were 2 drivers that were killed by Sudanese.
Yes,
and all the trailers and all the cars that have been taking cargo, South Sudan, they are packed. That demonstration is going on just because it's not covered in the media, but it's going on. I had a friend who traveled from there and he was telling me that people are starving, they don't have anything. Okay, let's say maybe you have a market because we feed a lot of the southern part of Sudan and we feed with so much supply a lot of our fish to the Congolese, right? But these are raw commodities. The president was in Kenya with the Dangote and William Ruto. He said that I stopped the movement of raw materials out of my country. All the minerals in their raw format cannot get out of the country. But I'm like, okay, but fish can also be a raw material.
True, it
coffee is also a raw material.
It is.
And we are still taking out coffee in a raw format.
But of late, the NRM government is emphasizing more on value addition when it comes to production. For example, coffee, I will quote him because that's what he has been saying of late, that we should add more value into the products that are being, or into the farm, into the products that come out of our gardens, so that we can get more money, being that we sell products that are finished, that everyone can consume them when they're finished products.
Yes, that is very good. You know, when the president is speaking, the president has mastered what you call the social economy. He so much speaks about the colonial economy, the Ugandan economy in the 60s and 90s, and it's very beautiful, by the way. I always watch his speeches, not in real time. I always want to watch them over the weekend. You know, I always go through these speeches, and I'm like, man, this is the professor of economics. Like, he gives a master class. But when it comes to implementation, to be them. No, no, like, he speaks so well, fluently. And we're like, wow, are the ministers listening? Are the technocrats listening? Very brilliant. He's a professor of social economy. Like, he has mastered the political economy and social economics within this very region.
So the problem,
but when it comes to implementation, that's why I was like, okay, I'm happy that you've been in position to have all these industrial parks, the 12 of them. And okay, I'm so much interested in what are they going to do? How are they going to perform? On Labor Day, the president was in a position to talk about how they are going to be in a position to put up houses for different people that are going to be within those industrial parks. It's something like, it seems to be a Chinese approach towards development, because it seems to be over taking the Chinese revolution kind of approach to development, because that's how China developed. But still, you must be in position to come up with what you call national priorities. Ugandans should get to know that within this year and year we are focusing on this, and the government has to come in and direct that. I'll give an example. All the Chinese know what the Chinese economy is going to be focusing on up to 2030. All of them know, because the Chinese Communist Party was in position to set it up.
To the general public, so everyone is aware about what will happen in 2030.
You can't invest in China. You don't. In China, you don't invest in what you want. You invest in what the government wants.
Yes.
It is a state-guided investment. Now, of course, they can say, "Omaniwano, Simanya, human rights, rule of law." What has rule of law done for Ugandans? You think Ugandans are being interested in rule of law? People want to get their countries move forward.
You sound like what's his name? The president of who says, you people should forget about democracy. It is not ours.
I sound like Ibrahim Traore.
According to the statement we've just given out, you sounded like him when you came out.
No, I'm just a realist.
When it comes to democracy, it is not for us Africans. You know,
it can be for us Africans, but what kind of democracy, and how do we define democracy as well? Yes, because according to the Americans, Abraham Lincoln, democracy is the rule of the people by the people for the people. And who are the people? And I always give the best example of democracy. The most democratic country in my own understanding was Libya, because in Libya, education was free. Or medication was free. Each and every woman that gets pregnant, you get $50,000 on your account. Each and every month, these kids get, the fetus, the baby, before it's even out, they get money deposited. When the mother gives birth, they get money deposited on you. This education is free from primary up to university. When you have any medical condition that cannot be handled within the country, the government can fly you out. That's democracy. Like, people enjoy. People benefit
from the government.
How do you verify that? So that's what people call democracy. But for me, I'm so much interested in the industrial hubs that are being in position to be set up. How are they going to move forward? You understand? So I also like the discussion within this debate that was brought by the Governor Bank of Uganda. He gave a very fundamental
bill. Yes, when he was brought to the committee concerning the the Sovereignty Bill 2026, and he raised quite a number of key points where he talked about how this bill will affect the economy, starting with the banking or the financial sector, that this will restrict money to come into banks, being that you've restricted money to come from abroad. Remember that money goes directly to bank, where bank get money. But the more it gets money, more employment will be given to the locals. Besides that, the country will also enable to do exchange of commodities, being that there is money within different financial institutions within the country.
Yeah, he also talked about the meaning of sovereignty in the economic terms. I so much liked him. I don't know him, but I really want to thank him for this. He said the sovereignty of the country can only be defined, can mostly be defined by having what you call fair terms of trade. Because terms of trade is the balance, the balance that the country gets after deducting on the cost of imports and the cost of exports.
Yes.
How much do you export and how much do you import? You understand?
Yes.
Uganda will spend too much money on imports. And we gain too little from the exports. So the sovereignty in that case cannot be defined by having a law. It can only be defined by coming up with a system that can be in a position to help us have favorable terms of trade. And terms of trade come when we talk about production. And what are we producing? You've talked about the tomatoes and the fish. They can sustain us.
Do you know that most of the tomato that is being consumed in Uganda comes from Kenya?
What about the one you said you take to South Sudan?
We only take their eggs, not tomatoes.
So the point is that we should be in a position to support that. And I like the industrialization kind of approach. Because at the end of the day, the president seems to have some kind of dream that not so many people have understood. I'm really wonder. I don't understand. Because the president has so much talked about, electricity.
True.
We have enough.
True.
Okay, we have more than enough
prices
electricity.
are still high.
Yes. Kukwanga ababi banji. It's my distributor, regulator, bani. There are so many cases in there, and each one of them takes a percentage. Definitely, the final consumer, the prices has to go high.
Yes.
You have a regulator, a distributor, a transmitter, like many bodies in there, and each and everybody that comes in, they have to get a cut from that. Now that explains as to why the final price to a consumer is high. But I was talking about it in this very angle, that from the president that has so much talked about electricity, and Uganda produces almost 2,000 megawatts. Actually, the highest within the region, because we even export electricity to different African countries.
Kenya, yes.
That is good. 2, let this electricity be connected to the industrialization the president is talking about. That is very powerful. Now you see the dots connecting, right? 3, let us have the infrastructure development, like the standard gauge railway line.
That will enable the transportation from the different East African countries, yes.
Very beautiful. Like you said, connection of, you see the dots. But you only get this communication from the president.
Because I think being that he's the vision bearer to the NRM party.
Yeah, but he doesn't work alone. He has a cabinet.
Someone told me, that was last week, that there are very many presidential advisors, but the president himself advises the presidential advisors.
Would you like to become a presidential advisor one time?
I wouldn't wish to be one, because my will not be. I wouldn't wish.
So, but I think this also takes us to the performance of government here, Babubi.
Yes, I wanted to talk about this bill in a few. I wanted to we talk about it in the political perspective, whereby we saw quite a number of opposition parties actually did not agree onto this bill, because we saw that was in the past election, in the last concluded elections, where we saw the National Unity Platform came out and was very free. They came out on social medias and different media companies. They came out and announced that they don't have the money that will support the election, whereby they asked money from the Ugandans and those the well-wishers from outside the country. And someone posed the question into the committee when they were going through this bill, that is this bill, they brought this bill to fight the opposition into the country. I quote the Speaker of Parliament a few days back. He came out and said, by 2031, we shall not have any opposition party or any opposition in Uganda.
That was the Speaker of Parliament?
Yes. And also the President himself came out and said that by the end of this Chisanja, they will not have opposition.
I don't think that is good. I don't think that is true, because we who knows who will be here in 2031. You know, in politics, anything, a day is just long enough. You don't, you know. But of course, that is not good. And this country is not led by the people that you've just mentioned. Uganda is going to be here. Actually, so many people want to think that Uganda has been here for 40 years. That is also one of the problems that we have. You know, we don't have any day that we celebrate during the days of Obote. You want to say that Obote did nothing?
Of course he did something.
Then we should be having a day to celebrate the government of Obote. Then we should have a day to celebrate within the government of Amin Dada, because he was here for 8 years.
Yes.
Now, Uganda only celebrates 4 days. The NRM Liberation Day, which is on the 26th. The fasting day, they put their day in the first they put their day in the first month of the year. And then the second day we celebrate is Martyrs Day. Then we go to January Umuz Day, Labor Day, and Heroes Day. And then you do Christmas, Eid, and you know, it's like Uganda people want us to think that Uganda has been here for only 40 years.
Without them, Uganda wouldn't have
definitely
been
that's not good. That is not good at all. Like, we are totally cut off from the history of this country. That is very bad.
I've remembered something. I remember it was on Tuesday. The leader of opposition came on the floor of parliament to raise concerns about this bill. And when he said, or when he mentioned the president, His Excellency Kaguta Museveni, I remember the speaker herself came out and said, you should also add Sabalwani. And Joel Senyon said, that's not part of his name, that I indicated onto the national ID. So if he's Sabalwani, it is very okay. But when you talk about his name, that is not part of his name.
Yeah, I think we have a very serious problem. Yeah, the biggest problem that we have is to go into a system that we are not ready to see operational. Because now the system that we are talking about, the democratic dispensation, the multipartyism, where were you in 2005?
I was around.
I mean, how old were you?
Very old.
So they voted for that in 2005. I was not so much understanding what was happening, but my dad was, you know, following. For 2005, I was in either P7 or P6. We're trying to follow that bill and understand. I think we have a very big problem. We need a system that's going to be beneficial for Ugandans. Because you can't be into a multi-party system of governance or dispensation, and then you don't allow the opposition to function the way it's supposed to function.
How is how is it supposed to function?
No. The moment you say that it's multi-partyism, right?
Yes.
That means you no longer have a single party system of governance. Meaning, you must let NUP operate. Let the FDC operate. Let all these political parties become operative.
Yes.
Allow them, facilitate them. Actually,
but they do. They do facilitate them via iPod, though quite a number of opposition parties don't want to go into iPod. And remember that iPod money, surprisingly, comes from abroad. It is not being funded. The money that is being given into iPod does not come from the government.
It's okay, but you don't only give them money, you also give them space to operate. We've seen
they have the space to where they operate from.
No, come on. We've seen on so many instances where opposition campaigns have been so much stopped.
Yes.
Yeah.
And their rallies have been stopped. And besides even rallies and engagements, different engagements. Yes, with the NRM government or the NRM as a political party, they keep on engaging from different parts of the country.
The only year political parties are allowed to function is probably during that year when elections are going on. But right now we should be seeing Budida Franca moving around. We should be seeing Kasibante moving, Munyagwa moving around, because they come up with political parties. And the role of political parties.
Munyagwa is always on TV. He moves around.
on one TV. But the only thing that I'm trying to say is that as a country, we should be in position to move a little bit further than this. Yes, we've been in position to have the NRM engaging at different levels, but we should let other political parties operate to the extent that even the Speaker of Parliament turns out to be yellow. But that's not the role.
Because they have the say. Because they have this. They have the majority.
Then she's, of course. Then the job of the Speaker of Parliament is supposed to be neutral. He's supposed to be neutral. At the end of the day, you're heading a national parliament, not a parliament that belongs to a political party. Yes. And
we've seen quite a number of times when the Speaker herself comes out to show his side, regardless. She's supposed to be neutral. Whereby, I remember she's also campaigning for the second term as the Speaker of Parliament. She came out and said that me as a person, whatever General MK wants, I'll be able to support. As a parliament, will come in full support. and when she was asked about the statements that she made, she said that was an AI video. It wasn't me.
Wow. Now, I just wanted to drive this point home, that in this democratic dispensation, we should be in position to have respect to what we call the election of separation of powers. That you have a cabinet that is functioning, the executive, the judiciary, and the legislature. Now, there is a very big problem in Uganda defining the state and the government. Now, the state is supposed to be neutral because the state doesn't change, but the governments change.
Yes.
Now, because the NRM government has been here for so long,
I will pose a question there. When you say there's a difference between a state and a government, so what makes up a state? A state.
What makes up a state? These are national institutions that are supposed to ensure that the state is okay and operative throughout. That's the army, the police, the judiciary, and the judiciary, and all other organs that are supposed to protect Uganda within the boundaries. You understand? Now, a government comes to run day-to-day affairs of the state, and that's why it is periodic. We give them a term 5 years to go away. And by the way, the government is not supposed to go for 5 years.
How long is it supposed to go?
We can take it out anytime we want, so long as we see that they are not functioning. They are supposed to function. That's why there is space for impeachment. But
is the NRM government functioning?
It depends, but of course,
by look of things, being that we are ending this term and I think next week on Wednesday, the elected president will take oath at Koroho ceremonial grounds. So by look of things, has the NRM government worked?
Maybe I should give them a percentage, and I'll start with you.
I will not say anything. We talk about the cabinet. That is good.
Yes, I think.
Let's talk about the cabinet, how they performed. The president himself calls this cabinet the fisherman's cabinet. We see quite, and actually I've passed a number of bills. When you talk about, I remember there's a bill that concerned adding the Uganda Coffee organization into the Ministry of Agriculture, whereby we saw quite a number of people and organizations weren't happy. That is to say, the Uganda Kingdom wasn't happy because they said very many people were to lose jobs. Besides that, the agriculture, the Ministry of Agriculture has a lot of things to do. It will not be able to provide seedlings of coffee to local farmers. It will not be able to do the outreaches onto local, farmers to see what's really affecting the production and how are they supposed to work upon in order to increase the production of coffee in Uganda, being that coffee did quite well in the few last year. Exportation was really good, and the government was able to get a huge amount of money from coffee. So that's why more emphasis.
What do you mean by huge? Because that's the money they've been getting for the last 20 years.
But there's an increment.
No, there's no increment. The increment will only come from value addition. Uganda has been exporting coffee for the last 70 years, and nothing has ever been done. We export raw coffee.
Okay.
So if there is any increment in terms of value, and it's guessed by 5-10%, because at the end of the day, the president speaks about value addition, and the president says that raw material should not get out of this country, and I like that, and I like the fact that we are coming up with regional industrial parks that will be in a position to add value on this. But I'm like, okay, let's start with the coffee. Number one, it's the cheapest, and that's why number two, it is one of the things that bring in more money in this very country.
Yes.
And our input is very low.
Very little, yes.
You know, our input is very low. So why don't you start with the coffee? No, wait.
But they started. Do you know this park? There is is it in Tungamo? The coffee farm something park that is in Tungamo. But someone posed the question concerning that park. So you expect people to transport coffee from Masaka to take it to Tungamo to be processed and then brought back to Kampala or taken outside the country, and you know it wasn't adding up.
Yeah, I think that was it was a bit of a bust investment. Yes,
and remember the government invested a huge amount of money.
A lot of money. A lot of money, and I think that's where Diamond Platinum was given 700 million to come and perform, and why was not that money not given to? Okay, maybe, you know, the problem is here. I've always been telling you, even when you came over here, when the president is speaking, you see a lot of wisdom in our Jaja. Jaja Mogezi nyo. But I'm not saying nae. No, I am saying that you look at the president, he has mastered everything. He has a playbook. You know, he has a playbook. He knows exactly what you're supposed to do. But we are not doing anything. Yes, coffee is one of our biggest resources. Very beautiful, very powerful. How are we handling it? Let's look at different countries. How has Ethiopia done this? Because Ethiopia is the biggest producer of coffee in Africa.
Yes.
Uganda coming number 2. You know, in Ethiopia, they got coffee and they look at it as the national brand. It's a branded kind of material. Even when you fly the Ethiopian Airlines, you can get to understand.
Actually, you're being given a cup of coffee.
Definitely. It's very national. You know, when it comes to investments, they are very deliberate. And they are so much aiming at increasing the value. But Uganda, actually, I so much didn't understand the politics of taking the Uganda Coffee Authority under the Ministry of, but I would be so much interested in coming up with an institute, the Coffee Institute in Uganda.
Yes.
If that one, if you said it's Bushiri in Tungamo,
It is in Tungamo.
that area that was put in there, if it was like an institute where Ugandans go and study coffee,
That would have been, actually, that would have made sense.
We need an institute for coffee. We need an institute for gold. I'm coming to gold. Why? Uganda gets $6 billion from the gold.
Annually?
That is 18.23 trillion Ugandan money.
Shillings.
Right, Ugandan shillings. That was according to the Vision, I think around last year. You know? But do you know how much is remaining in our economy? Only $600 million. Not even a billion. Not even two. But out of the 6 billion, Uganda gets only 600 million. Where is the rest of the gold going?
I was actually going to pose the same question. Where is the rest of the money? And the
where is the rest of the money going? And this is the gold that is not only coming from Uganda, we also get from our neighbors. How we get from the neighbors, that's also a topic another day.
Because there's a lot of, when I get the opportunity,
there's a serious game that is being played around here. But the point is here, why don't we have structures that can make Uganda get at least half of that money from the gold? You understand?
Yeah.
Yes, we have 7 refineries within Uganda right now. Why is it that we are not gaining from the purification process? This gold gets here in its raw format. They take it in Dubai, process it, the Matakapo stamp here in UAE.
Dubai, yes.
Then it goes to world market as Dubai as gold from UAE. So there are so many issues that can change Uganda within just a period of not even 40 years. But just because there is a very big problem when it comes to the implementation. The president sounds so smart, like technically wonderful. But when it comes to the implementation, the fishermen have let him down.
As he calls them.
Yeah, the fishermen have let him down.
But
the fishermen have let us down.
As Ugandans.
They've let us down. Quite end of the day.
So would you say how have they let the Ugandans down? Would you compare this 11th parliament to the 10th parliament in terms of performance?
It's a little bit hard to assess the Ugandan parliament, most especially when over 80% of them belong to the ruling party. It's a very, very hard one.
What hurts me when you talk about the Parliament of Uganda, you see whenever I see sittings in the Parliament of Uganda, you see many of the seats that are vacant, and you ask yourself, where are these people? You know, they pass out laws when most of them are not aware about them because they are absent. Most of them have gone to, most of them go abroad. And we saw, if you remember the retreat that was in Chankwanzi, the NRM, was it a caucus? And the NRM caucus went to Chankwanzi, and the president said that all NRM member of parliament should mind, or they should reduce going outside the country. Instead of going outside the country, they should invest that money within Uganda so that they can make the better Uganda as they wish, or as they want it to see, they want it to be, you know. And I'm like, why are they putting more money? You know, the last cabinet, or this outgoing cabinet, more money is being spent into the parliament. When you talk about how money, some people said they splash money within the parliament into this 11th parliament. You see member of parliament being awarded 100 million, you talk about the 10 million, and you ask yourself, you know, how are they going to, how are the Ugandans going to benefit from the money that is being given to these member of parliaments? Because it is affecting the economy. Yeah. You know, more money is being awarded, but the results are zero. Yeah. In my opinion. Yeah. We don't see the results, but more money is being given out, you know? Yeah. You've talked about what happened in Chankwanzi, and I think they were there for 5 or 4 days. 7 days. 7 days. I so much want to relate this because why would a parliament that is incoming go to Chankwanzi and do what? That should be the first question, because that's the National Leadership Institute. And which kind of leadership are they studying there? I so much want to relate this to, because by the time we are having that, the Chinese had theirs. I want to compare the two.
When the Chinese parliament sat, they are almost 3,000 by the way.
Yes.
In now, they developed what we call an agenda for China in the next 20 years. Very clear. China is investing in 6 things. Number 1, low altitude economy. You know what it means?
Yes.
Drones. Number 2, semiconductors. Those are the chips that they use to power computers. And all that. Number 3, AI. For so long, the world market of artificial intelligence was dominated by ChatGPT and American firm. The Chinese came in with theirs, DeepSeek.
DeepSeek, yes.
You understand? Yeah. The first that they're investing in is energy storage alternatives. There are 6 of them. They are very clear. Now, meaning all government investments, all declarations, all parliamentary discussions have to be in line with those 6 objectives. Very clear. Now, that's what they started in a caucus. Now, it's like that they start the parliamentary discussion when everything is clear. I don't know if you're getting me.
I get you.
That's what we would expect to have for something like the Chang Kwan's Leadership Institute. You understand? But everyone, whoever was there, they were waiting for 100 million.
And
Can you imagine?
And a few of them came out complaining that we were only given 20. So they're waiting for the remaining.
So that's a very, very big challenge to the future of this country. At the end of the day, when a leader is seen as a provider, because leadership, for instance, at parliamentary level, it's service.
True.
You would even get surprised why a member of parliament would be driving a car of 300 million, and they are representing poor communities. Very poor communities.
Poor
That's the level where we are. Right? Actually, that's why people think that in order for you to get a little bit of money, you have
join
to go into politics.
Yes.
And Museveni has mastered that. Museveni has mastered that. Let them eat. We call it belly politics. The president of that in Africa is Onomuzeiwe Cameroon. Paul Biya. He has mastered it. Let people eat. Paul Biya is 93. He's going up to 99 years. You know?
And
now he has
appointed as a vice president.
Patrick Biya is taking over leadership right there. So Museveni has also mastered it. Let people eat, such that they don't so much disturb you. That's a very big problem to this country.
And you know, when you talk about, you've called it belly politics. Of late, that's where Uganda is heading. Because we see quite a number of people, they even go and acquire loans from banks, from money lenders, because they want to win elections. So that, you know, it's a source of income. It's no longer giving service to the public. And that's why, actually, I would say, the 11th parliament has really failed the Ugandans because most of them are focusing on money. You know, they don't mind. Whenever they say they are going to give out money, the parliament is full house. But whenever they are passing bills that, you know, affect the country or concern the local Ugandans and themselves as well, they are nowhere to be seen. So I would say the 11th parliament also falls in that docket of belly politics.
It has, in my opinion, it has been the most extravagant parliament on the African continent. I'm not sure about that anyway.
In your opinion?
But yeah, it has been the most extravagant one. But maybe lastly, we can talk about what has been your best performing ministry or minister.
I would say the Ministry of Health.
Really?
When you talk this vaccine of, no, not herself, but the ministry. Because of late, she's nowhere to be seen. She was very common into the COVID era, but now she's nowhere to be seen. But I saw her when they were giving out that vaccine of HIV. Is it
AstraZeneca?
Yes, I saw her. So I would say for that, I would recommend the Ministry of Health.
That's been the most performing one.
Well, not at all, but you know, you give it a 5% onto a scale of 10. And also the security, they have really done well. Yes, the Ministry of Defense, they have done well, I would say, in my opinion, because look at how things are. I will take you back in the election period. Very many people wanted to be chaotic, but they brought out the iron hand, which I'm not happy with how things were. Regardless that no one is perfect, we all do mistakes. The Ministry of Defense as well has done a lot of bad things to the people. And I would say, being that we are in for the next term, they should reconsider and you know, change the way they do things.
Yeah, for me, I would tell you my worst ministries. One is the Ministry of Internal Affairs. Internal Affairs, specifically the Electoral Commission, has been my worst. and then the Minister of Education. Yeah, there is a very big problem in Uganda that so many people have not realized. You know, in Uganda we have almost 10 curriculums being taught in this very country.
Actually, you know,
the curriculums that we have,
different curriculum.
We have, within even international schools, you have 5 curriculums. We have a Christian-based,
Cambridge.
we have a Cambridge assessment, we have one for the Indians. Now, this is a very big disadvantage to someone like me who cannot afford to take a child or a sibling or anyone in international schools.
True.
But in Uganda, most of the Ugandans, actually, in Kampala, we have almost 127 international schools. They have their own curriculum.
Yes.
Kati omwana we Nakasongola, omwana we Nakaseke, muto wa Rita bakunzi byasoma tebitegerekeka. Now that's a very, very big challenge and a very big disadvantage. So I'm like, okay, how do we get here? Because we have what we call the National Curriculum Development Center.
Yes. Who
Who approves this curriculum? And what? Because at the end of the day, almost 95% of Ugandans cannot afford international schools.
Yes, true.
I don't know if you get what I'm saying.
Yes, I
so
get
the assessment is already poor. You have so many people that are getting at a level where they will not be in a position to benefit. So that's why I really, really don't understand why the Ministry of Education, I don't understand the arrangement under which some Ugandans are allowed to have so many curriculums that are operational, to the extent that even this local curriculum or the known curriculum, by the time people went back to school this year, they didn't know what A-level was going to study.
Actually, the ministry itself wasn't sure.
Yeah, they weren't
because they weren't sure on when they should introduce the new curriculum in A-level.
Yeah, but people in international schools are enjoying it.
Very okay.
Yeah, so that's why the Ministry of Education, I really don't understand how it has been my worst in that very angle.
My worst, I would go to...
And my second worst, internal affairs, because of the elections and all that circus. Yeah.
Maybe I want to pose a question to URA. You know, Uganda
URA.
asking...
URA is Minister of Finance.
Finance, they're under finance, but when it comes to finance, the supplementaries that they usually bring out, you know, Ugandans want to know where is the money going. Services, many people are complaining onto service delivery from different parts of the country.
Okay.
Not forgetting yesterday it rained and the Kampala suburb, you know, we saw floods everywhere.
Yeah.
When you go to downtown, floods were everywhere, and people are like, really, what's going on? Last month...
That is KCCA, and the KCCA is under the Minister of Presidency.
Yes, and last month...
So that is your ministry?
No, I'm just giving... I'm just talking about, like... Now, last month, the Prime Minister came out and promised to compensate the traders that were being affected
lost
by
the floods, yes.
And a few months back, this very month that we've ended April, the traders went to Naguru and were being denied access into the premises. They were still going, they have not yet received their money, and people are not okay. The same thing happened yesterday. So you ask yourself, what's really happening? And I'm like, really, the 12th Parliament should consider the local people, being that people are affected and people are not okay, truth be told.
Yeah.
And you cannot run away from it.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Regan, for that analysis. You've just made it clear that probably the Ministry of Presidency was your worst performing ministry. So that has been it for New Day this week, the Friday version. We'll get together and then share opinion about some of the things that have been in position to make the biggest headlines within the course of the week. I'm Dr. Samuel Charles Cake, together with my colleague Mugabe Regan. We should leave you into the hands of Skilling Uganda, which is the next program, which runs from 9 to 11. See you next week.
Thank you.